Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 15, and just as a disclosure, this video is recorded before the Thursday matches in Gameweek 14, so Fulham versus Brighton and Bournemouth versus Tottenham Hotspur. Bear that in mind when you see all the ranks and stuff on the left-hand side, and there could be some injuries or stuff that happens during the Thursday matches, and there will be plenty of press conferences on the Friday, so definitely stay tuned for the deadline stream on Saturday, so you're up to date with all the latest information for Fantasy Premier League. And over the weekend, I'll be recording UCL Fantasy content for Match Day 6. Smash the like button and subscribe for you if you want to see all of that content, and also a reaction stream on the Friday. It's not an ideal time to do it, but with a quick turnaround in deadlines and a short window to record these videos and do these live streams, I could do one on Friday, and then of course on the Saturday we'll still get the deadline stream and perhaps another reaction stream. But for that live stream, I'll be covering the Saturday games and look ahead to Gameweek 16. Keep your eyes peeled on this channel for the latest updates in terms of UCL Fantasy and FPL content. And on screen you can see Drafthound and their player rankings for the next 3 game weeks. Saka, Palmer, Cunha, Fernandes and Haaland make up the top 5, and Salah will shoot up these rankings. He's typically first in these lists, and he is actually one of the top recommended captains for Gameweek 15. Definitely check out the link in the description below for Drafthound and everything else there, like my Twitter and Instagram, the Discord server, FPL League, and also my Spotify. But let's jump straight into the best wildcard team for Gameweek 15. My squad value is approximately 103.2 million, but it will be different for everybody watching because it depends on certain factors such as when you bought these players in and how much value you have tied up in them. So that's why I'll discuss some cheaper and more expensive players in each position, just in case you've got more money to spend or maybe you are struggling to build this exact 50-man squad. I'm going to start off with the 2 goalkeepers. There's going to be some big differences, mainly in the outfield positions though, and also some interesting double-ups in certain areas. I still have a lot of confidence in the goalkeepers I discussed in recent wildcard videos, so that includes Robert Sanchez. He was benched against Southampton, but I think he'll start virtually every single Premier League game this season. You've also got Verbruggen, who is a very cheap goalkeeper and offers a lot of value there, especially until Gameweek 18. And Onana is kind of a set and forget option in goal, but David Raya can keep a clean sheet in any given game, and I think Arsenal are one of 2 teams you'd want to double up on defensively, the other being Liverpool, who have been a bit shakier defensively in recent games, but those are more away from home, conceding 3 times to Newcastle and twice to Southampton, but they also kept clean sheets in back-to-back games against Manchester City and Real Madrid at Anfield, so I still don't mind doubling up on the Reds, but I think Arsenal would be my preference right now if I had to pick one team to go for 2 in terms of one defender and Raya in goal, or you might even want to go for Gabriel and Timber, but I don't think Gabriel is in the clear yet. There is still a chance he misses out against Fulham away, but I personally think he will be available, and if you've got the funds, I still think that's a great entry point into that Arsenal defence. So Raya is going to be the main choice in goal for this Gameweek 15 wildcard team, but I'd still highly recommend Onana, Sanchez and Verbruggen. That is my current top 4 alongside David Raya, and the backup goalkeeper, despite the heavy loss to Leicester City, is going to be Fabianski. The alternative backup choice you'll really have is Forster, but you do save 0.2 million by going for Fabianski, and more often than not, you're just going to start David Raya or the other goalkeepers I mentioned, depending on your budget and how you want to structure your team defensively. So I've gone for Raya and Fabianski in this wildcard team. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. It has been a while since Trent Alexander-Arnold has featured in one of these wildcard videos. I was very bullish on him at the beginning of this season, and in fact I owned him until Gameweek 8, and I regretted selling him because Liverpool kept churning clean sheet after clean sheet, and I was missing out over the last couple of weeks. But with Trent, he has been slightly disappointing this season, only 1 assist before that Newcastle game, but the fact he came on as a substitute and provided 2 assists for Salah, that is very encouraging, and I've always highlighted the underlying stats in terms of big chance created and key passes, which were 6 and 22 respectively at the time, and he was actually mentioned as a purchase in the recent Transfers podcast, which was recorded before the Liverpool versus Newcastle game that we got in Gameweek 14. So I think Trent is definitely the best way to cover Liverpool defensively. We've also got Virgil van Dijk, and you might want to take a punt on Joe Gomez, who was terrible against Newcastle to be fair, and we could see rotation between him and Quansah whilst Konate is out. Now, I wouldn't invest in Robertson, and I've said this for many months now, so really it's about Trent or Virgil van Dijk at this moment in time for a kind of settled starter, but Trent was benched in Game Week 14, and Arne Slot said before the Newcastle game that Trent won't play the 90 minutes in the next two matches, and that includes Everton away, the Merseyside derby that we're going to get in Game Week 15. So this might not be the safest pick for this week, but long-term Trent will start virtually every single game, of course with rotation and depending on circumstances and the Champions League and stuff like that. We could see him bench from time to time later this season, but I think he'll start most games in this Christmas period and be a great asset for you and worth that 6.9 million price tag. And he's not a differential or anything, but I do think his returns could really push you up the ranks in your mini leagues and also in general, depending on your rank objective. But let's now go for another Arsenal defender. So we've got this defensive double up. I'm going to go for Jurrien Timber, but I have to stress, if you got the extra funds, I'd go for Gabriel over Jurrien Timber. But because I don't want to make too many sacrifices in other areas and have a really balanced 50-man squad, I've gone for the Dutchman who scored his first Premier League goal of the season against Manchester United in that 2-0 victory from a set piece, and Gabriel is the king of corners and set pieces. So I still think he's the man if you want to go for an Arsenal defender and have a bit of attacking potential. But even Timber, who isn't the tallest guy in the world, he can also get in on the action. Saliba also scored in that game, but he's not the most aggressive from these situations, and I don't think he'll get anywhere near as many goals as Gabriel. But Timber does have a bit of creativity about him. He's actually got a decent number of key passes, which I highlighted in a recent Transfers podcast, where Jurrien Timber was highlighted as another purchase. So I think it's worth going for one or two premium defenders and even David Raya in goal and investing a lot of money in your defensive line to have that squad depth and also to cover this very hectic Christmas period where we've got games every 2 or 3 days essentially in the Premier League and Champions League, and a lot of rotation and also issues like suspensions that could arise over the next couple of weeks. But let's now go to more cheaper options because you can't invest that much money in this position and just go for Gvardiol and Bodro because you want to invest the majority of your funds in the midfield, as you well know by now. But I'm going to go for Milos Kerkez. I'm not a big fan of Bournemouth defensively, but the Hungarian has a bit of attacking potential. He can score the odd goal, and he also has a bit of assist threat about him. He got 2 assists, in fact, against Manchester City a couple of weeks ago, and Bournemouth have excellent fixtures until Game Week 21. Now, if I'm ranking Bournemouth assets in general, it'd probably be Van Olsen first, Semenyo second, and Kerkez third, but you could also make a case for Kluivert. It's just when you look at the other Bournemouth defenders, like Senesi and also Zabarnyi, or even Kepa in goal, I think you just go for Kerkez, and he's also still a differential. He might not have been impressive last season, and in fact, I went for Zabarnyi in that double game week, and he was a hero for me, but it's a very different case this season. Just go for Milos Kerkez if you want that Bournemouth defensive coverage. Let's also go for another kind of rotation victim of Game Week 14 in Levi Colwill, and I still think Robert Sanchez is the best way of covering Chelsea defensively, but Colwill can rotate very nicely with your other defenders, and Chelsea have the best fixtures until Game Week 22, essentially until January the 25th when they play Manchester City. Before that, the only difficult game they've got on paper is Tottenham away, and Chelsea have a great record against Tottenham in recent seasons. In fact, last season they really battered them at their own ground, and even though you might not expect a clean sheet, Chelsea can surprise you, and in Game Week 13 they kept a clean sheet against Aston Villa of all teams. So I think Levi Colwill is still a very decent defender. You may argue Cucurella is even better, but I'd expect him to be rotated fairly soon, and Colwill could just start week in, week out, whilst in the Conference League and the other cup competitions, Chelsea just play their B team and still get the job done. But let's now round things off with another cheap defender with great fixtures over the next 5 game weeks, and that's going to be Van Hecke. He's not going to be the most sensational pick in the world, and I doubt he's going to get many goals, assists, or even bonus points. And just like with Colwill, you might argue Verbruggen is the best way of covering that Brighton defence, and Estupinian will be the most exciting pick. But I'm going to go for these solid defenders who should start week in, week out, and the Dutchman is definitely by far the safest pick for the Seagulls in this position. So I'd go for this sort of structure with Trent, and preferably it would be Gabriel, but if not, and you're struggling for funds like me, go for Jurrien Timber, and then some budget defenders like Kerkez, Colwill, and Van Hecke. Mohamed Salah is a man on a mission. He almost single-handedly carried Liverpool to a victory at St James's Park, and he is doing just absolutely everything to drive Liverpool to the title. In fact, he has been involved in 75% of their goals in the Premier League this season, which is staggering. You could argue it's not sustainable, and if Salah dips in form, Liverpool could really struggle, but they've still got other attacking options like Gakpo, Diaz, Jota when he's available, and occasionally Darwin Núñez and the midfielders can also pop along with goals. But Salah is definitely the talisman. He's on penalties, the underlying stats are incredible, and since Game Week 8, he has produced a double-digit haul in every single game, bar Brighton, and guess what? He's still got 9 points. His run is simply ridiculous, and there will be a drop-off at some stage, but I still think he'll get consistent returns. Only 3 blanks this season, so Mohamed Salah is almost certainly going to be a lock in this wildcard team. He's by far the best FPL asset at this moment in time, although I think Palmer and Saka could give him a run for his money until the end of the year, and we have seen a dip in Salah's form post-Christmas in the last 2 seasons. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but it is a possibility, especially with more matches, fatigue, and other factors that come into play. But speaking of which, I'd also go for Bukayo Saka. I mentioned him just now, and he's another one that kind of forms part of this template midfield three that you almost certainly want to invest in, and the other one would be Cole Palmer. If I had to pick one between Palmer or Saka, it'd still be Palmer just about, but there isn't much separating these two, and over the last 4 or 5 game weeks, Saka has been in better form, but it's very close between these two, and they're going to be right up there amongst the highest scoring players in FPL this season. This might even be the top 3 players in FPL across all positions, but let's see how Erling Haaland gets on over the next couple of months, and maybe he can also put himself back into the equation because he was outstanding in the first 5 game weeks of the season, and we can't forget that. The next midfielder will surprise you. I haven't mentioned him in quite a while, particularly in one of these wildcard videos, but he has been quite consistent in recent weeks, and his team have been up and down like a yo-yo. 1 minute they beat Man City away from home 4-0, then they lose to Ipswich Town 2-1 in a home match. But I think Brennan Johnson is still one of the best midfielders at this price point and below, but you could certainly go for Kudus, maybe Matoma, Semenya would definitely be up there, and Morgan Rogers, who I mentioned in the last video, and he in fact delivered a very healthy return against Brentford, but you could see rotation with Aston Villa against Southampton in Game Week 15. Maybe not to the same level as we saw with Chelsea, but it's still a distinct possibility. I'd still back Rogers to start that game though, and if you want that cheap midfielder, he is still a viable option. But Brennan Johnson is going to go under the radar over this Christmas period, and he could also play up front at times alongside Dominic Solanke, and it looks like the formation at the time it's recording versus Bournemouth is going to be a 3-5-2 sort of formation, maybe a 3-4-3, but Johnson could play up front with Solanke from time to time, and he makes just excellent runs. His XG is only bettered by 2 players in the league so far this season in Mohamed Salah and Erling Haaland. But let's now round things off with a very cheap enabler who could also surprise you from time to time, and that's going to be Amad Diallo. But if you've got funds in the bank, you might still be tempted to go for Semenyo or Morgan Rogers. But bear in mind, with this sort of structure, you will have some big benching headaches, but I still think it's worth having that squad depth over this Christmas period for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and sometimes you're going to need absolutely everybody to fill in and at least make an appearance to get you out of trouble and prevent those red arrows. As mentioned earlier, this video is recorded before the Thursday matches, so we'll see how Brighton get on against Fulham tonight, and João Pedro is still very, very high in my forward rankings. Now, is he going to be the most consistent forward ever? Probably not, because he does get a lot of injuries and he can sometimes be absolutely brilliant and then be very frustrating. I brought him back in Game Week 4 and he got injured in the process, and I was just very underwhelmed by that signing. But I've actually bought him in for Game Week 14, so I'm just hoping for the very best there, especially after selling Isak, which was an absolute howler on my part, and I'll discuss that in the team selection and deadline stream. But João Pedro is still easily in the top 5 forwards to buy in Game Week 15 and beyond. And even after Brighton's fixtures turn for the worse around Game Week 19, I still think João Pedro has a lot to offer, and he has delivered big returns against some of the best teams in the country like Arsenal and Manchester City, even Man United earlier in the season as well. But let's now go for a differential in this position in Evanilson, another Brazilian, and I still like Matheus Cunha by the way, but Wolves' fixtures turn for the worse around Game Week 18, and Wolves have been terrible in the last 2 matches, and Cunha, despite how brilliant he's been this season, he has blanked and not looked effective whatsoever. And I think Bournemouth are on the ascendancy, and even if they lose against Tottenham or don't get the result they want, I still think they'll create chances and Evanilson is my favourite Bournemouth asset at this moment in time. But you may argue Semenyo in the midfield for Brennan Johnson and Cunha for Evanilson is even better, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I've discussed that in recent wildcard videos as well. But let's now complete this forward line with a mid-priced option, and despite how much I like Isak and Ollie Watkins, I'm still going to go for Nicholas Jackson, who is still walking that suspension tightrope. One more yellow before Game Week 19, and he will miss a Premier League match, and that is probably imminent in the next couple of weeks. But if you've got the squad depth, like I've shown you here, that shouldn't be too much of an issue, and I think Jackson can do really well, especially with that sea of green in the fixture difficulty rating after Tottenham away in Game Week 15. And Jackson did score a hat-trick at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last season, so he's certainly capable of getting a return for you instantly, despite the disappointments against Southampton not playing a single minute. That may have benefited some of you if you vice-captain Salah or somebody who delivered that well in Game Week 14, but it's all apples and oranges. Everyone has a different circumstance, and I'm still very bullish on Jackson for the next couple of months. Only Erling Haaland has averaged more points per game in the forward position. There are a few questions that remain though with this wildcard squad. Who should we captain in Game Week 15? And what will the starting 11 look like? And that's where the website FPL Team comes in. There is no doubt about it this week, at least on paper. I would go for David Raya away from home against Fulham, which won't be the easiest of games, and you might not want to double up on the Gunners defensively in Game Week 15. But I'm going for a back three of Trent Alexander-Arnold, Jurrien Timber, and Milos Kerkez, and I can't stress enough, if you got the funds available, you might want to upgrade to Gabriel from Jurrien Timber, despite the yellow flag and the possible doubt going into Game Week 15. I'm also going for Johnson, Salah, Saka, and Cole Palmer, and another possible change in the starting 11 is actually going for Amad Diallo instead of Johnson this week, but the front three speaks for itself. Jackson, João Pedro, and Evanilson, with Salah as the captain and Saka as the vice. I actually don't mind Cole Palmer as a captaincy shout here, or João Pedro against Leicester. Despite the 3-1 win against West Ham and some brilliant football offensively, I still think West Ham had multiple big chances and they should have scored at least 2 or 3 goals. And ultimately, I think João Pedro and Brighton could put Leicester to the sword there, and I'm backing Ruud van Nistelrooy to be a good managerial appointment. I said that before his first game. It's still going to be a long way to go though, and you can't judge managers based on the first few matches. The same goes for Ruben Amorim, who I think will do a good job at Manchester United. The bench includes Fabianski, Amad Diallo, Van Heck, and Levi Colwill. The expected points is 57.8 according to FPL Team, and I've got nothing left over in the bank. So in terms of some possible changes, if you can't afford this team, you might want to go for one of Verbruggen, Sanchez, or Onana instead of David Raya, and you might want to go for Virgil van Dijk or even Joe Gomez instead of Trent Alexander-Arnold. And with that, you could easily get Gabriel instead of Jurrien Timber if you wish. And I don't even mind going for Timber and Gabriel at the same time, but I wouldn't triple up on Arsenal defensively because you want to save a spot for Bukayo Saka. And despite my kind of glowing reviews of Odegaard and Havertz, I still think you'd want to go for 2 Arsenal defenders, or Raya in goal, and then Bukayo Saka. So if you've got the funds, always go for the Arsenal talisman in Saka instead of Martin Odegaard. Palmer and Salah speak for themselves, and in Johnson's price range, there is Mitoma, Semenyo, Rodgers, and perhaps you might still want to go for Jarrod Bowen. He was very unfortunate not to deliver against Leicester, and in fact, he played very well in that game, and I think the returns will come for Jarrod Bowen and perhaps Kudus, who was more disappointing after serving that 5-game suspension. His performance wasn't good enough, but once the match sharpness is back, I think the Ghanaian could also be another great budget midfielder. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 31,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the Championships, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. If you have a 5-star review on my podcast, it goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 15 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.